On a frozen Christmas Eve night, a little girl clutched her baby brother on the side of a desolate Montana road. No cars stopped. No voices called. Only the howl of the blizzard promised an ending no child should ever face. But then, headlights cut through the storm and fate placed a stranger in their path. A man haunted by his own loss. A man who swore he would never fail a child again. What followed was not just a rescue, but the unraveling of a hidden truth and the beginning of something much greater than survival. This is a story about the power of compassion, the courage to confront darkness, and the quiet miracle of choosing to stand together when the world turns cold. If you believe in second chances and the healing strength of love, stay with us and subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories for more unforgettable journeys. The road wound endlessly through Gallatin Canyon, where silence had a way of clinging to the air as tightly as the snow clung to the mountainsides. Caleb Hart drove steadily, the headlights of his truck slicing through the curtain of white. Inside the cab, the world was as hushed as a tomb, no music to fill the space, no radio chatter to remind him that other voices existed. For years, he had grown accustomed to this kind of quiet, but tonight it pressed harder, reminding him of the loneliness he could never seem to outrun. He had known loss too deeply, and even the luxury of his F-350 Platinum felt more like a cage than a comfort. The steering wheel was firm under his hands, yet his grip betrayed something more than control. It carried the weight of memory, the kind that returned every winter like a wound that never healed. Long ago, he had watched helplessly as his younger sister vanished into a storm not unlike this one. He had been just a boy then, full of desperate prayers, but the snow had not been merciful. By the time rescuers reached her, the cold had taken everything. That night had carved itself into his bones, and though the years had piled on wealth, success, and recognition, none of it could thaw the ice that lived in his chest. He built a business from nothing, moved freight across impossible roads, mastered storms that would have broken other men, but he had never mastered the emptiness left behind. Christmas Eve should have meant warmth, yet for him it was nothing more than another night of endurance. Outside, the canyon howled. Inside, silence lingered like a second shadow. His gaze stayed fixed on the road, mile after mile, until something flickered at the edge of his vision. At first, he thought the storm was playing tricks. A shape, small and almost lost in the heaps of plowed snow, caught the sweep of his headlights. He blinked hard, leaned forward. Then he saw it clearly, too still to be wind, too fragile to be stone. A child, and in her arms something smaller still. Caleb's heart slammed against his ribs. Without thinking, he eased off the gas, the truck skidding lightly as he pulled over. The cold hit him the moment he opened the door, stinging his face, clawing through layers of fabric, but he barely noticed. His boots crunched on ice as he rushed toward the tiny figure. A girl, no older than 7, huddled against the snowbank. Her lips were blue, her eyes wide with fear, and her arms were wrapped fiercely around a bundle. The bundle moved, just once, and a tiny hand slipped from the blanket before falling still again. A baby. Caleb dropped to his knees in the snow, holding his palms out, voice gentle, as if approaching a wild colt that had known only fear. "It's all right, I'm here to help." The girl shook her head violently, pressing the infant closer. Her whisper cut through the storm like a blade. "Don't take my brother." Her words were both fragile and fierce, trembling yet unyielding. Caleb felt something ache deep within him, a recognition of desperation. Slowly, he reached into his wallet and pulled out an old photograph, a younger version of himself in a rescue jacket, smiling faintly beside a search and rescue team. "I used to help find kids who were lost," he told her. "My name is Caleb. I will not hurt you. I just want to keep you warm." For a long moment, her dark eyes studied him, measuring every inch of his face against the blizzard that had offered her nothing but cruelty. Finally, she gave the faintest nod. He exhaled, careful not to break the fragile trust that had sparked between them. He shrugged off his heavy parka, wrapping it around both children. The girl's name was Maya. The baby was Leo. Their names settled into his mind like promises. He lifted them gently, their combined weight alarmingly light, and carried them to the truck. Inside, warmth poured from the heater. Caleb draped an emergency blanket over them, his hands steady even as his pulse thundered. The storm battered the truck, but inside he created a cocoon of safety. "You're safe now," he said quietly. Yet Maya's eyes did not soften. She clutched Leo's tiny hand as though the world might still steal him away. Caleb reached for his radio and called for help, his voice clipped but calm, giving the sheriff their location. The reply crackled back through static, promising assistance as soon as the weather allowed. He glanced at Maya again. "See, they're coming for you, you're not alone anymore." But she did not seem convinced. Her body leaned toward Leo, her little shoulders braced against invisible threats. As the truck crawled forward through the canyon, Caleb tried again. "Where's your mom?" At that, her lips trembled. "The man, he said she would come back if we waited. He took her phone." Her voice was nearly swallowed by the wind outside. Caleb froze, a chill worse than the storm creeping through him. "What man?" he asked softly. Her answer was a whisper that tightened his chest. "His name is Roy. He said if she didn't do what he wanted, we would learn." Those last words cracked something in Caleb's soul. The memory of his sister, the night she disappeared, the helplessness, everything rushed back. But this time he clenched the wheel with renewed resolve. "Not these children," he vowed silently. "Not again." The road stretched ahead, treacherous and endless. Maya sat stiffly, guarding her brother, eyes darting between Caleb and the storm. He caught her gaze in the rearview mirror, steady and unflinching. "You're not alone out here anymore," he said, voice low but sure. "Tonight, someone's in your corner." She studied him for a long moment, and then, like the smallest thaw of ice after the longest winter, she nodded once. It was barely a movement, but it felt monumental. For Caleb, it was the first spark of something he thought he had lost forever: hope. The truck carried them toward the glow of the nearest town, the blizzard clawing at the glass, the tires fighting the drifts. Inside, a fragile silence settled, no longer empty but filled with something raw and fragile. Caleb stole glances at the children. At the girl who held her brother as if the whole world depended on her arms, at the infant whose life balanced on the edge of warmth and frost. And in the dim light of the dashboard, he felt his own silence begin to crack. Not from grief this time, but from the stirring of something alive, demanding, real. By the time the hospital lights appeared through the storm, he knew that his life had already changed. He had been driving through the night with ghosts. Now he drove with purpose. The hospital lights blazed against the storm as Caleb carried the children inside, his boots echoing on the polished floor. Nurses rushed forward, startled by the sight of a man in a weather-beaten coat clutching two half-frozen little ones. Maya's hands were raw from the cold, Leo's tiny lips pale. Caleb's heart pounded as doctors swept the baby into warm blankets and pads, while a nurse wrapped Maya's feet and placed a steaming cup of cocoa in her trembling hands. He stood nearby, hands still shaking, as if afraid that if he looked away even for a moment, the children would vanish back into the blizzard. Dr. Sienna Cow, a woman with a calm presence that steadied the chaos around her, nodded at Caleb. "You did the right thing bringing them here so fast," she said, but her words slipped off him like snow on steel. He could only watch as Maya refused to release her grip on her brother's hand, her small body curled like a shield around him even under the doctor's care. Caleb recognized that kind of fear, the kind born of betrayal, of promises broken too many times. Not long after, a man in a rumpled parka entered, his clipboard tucked beneath his arm. Benji Cole from Child Protective Services looked exhausted, the kind of tired that came from too many nights away from his own family. He asked quiet questions, glancing between Caleb, the girl, and the infant. Holiday placements were stretched thin, he explained. Normally the children would be placed in a shelter until their mother was found, but with the storm shutting down roads and every resource already overrun, the options were scarce. His eyes lingered on Caleb, uncertain. Caleb's instincts stirred. Logistics had always been his tool. When storms blocked highways, when supply chains failed, when others panicked, he planned. But this was not cargo or contracts. These were children, flesh and blood, fragile and frightened. Still, he heard himself speak with a firmness that surprised even him. "They can stay with me," he said. Just for tonight until you find their mother. My home is safe, secure, warmer than any shelter." He listed the guest wing, the backup generators, the cameras, the night guard. Benji hesitated, reminding him he was not family. Caleb met his gaze, unflinching. "I am not a stranger either." Sheriff Nora Pike arrived then, brisk but compassionate. Her presence carried authority, her badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. She studied Caleb with the sharp eyes of someone used to weighing trust against risk. "We ran your plates," she said quietly. "You check out. And Montana law allows emergency kin-like placement in this weather." She looked at Benji. "It is the right call." After a long moment, Benji relented, scribbling notes. "We will process paperwork and check in tomorrow." Caleb's chest tightened with something he had not felt in years. Responsibility, but also resolve. He gathered Maya and Leo once more, and Maya clung to her brother with a fierceness that broke his heart. Back at the ranch, he ushered them into warmth, peeling off their wet boots and socks, turning the heat high. His home, once silent and cold, now echoed with the soft cough of a baby, the rustle of blankets, the hesitant breath of a frightened child. He set up a cot beside a crib, angling the monitor so Maya could see Leo's chest rise and fall. Only then did her small shoulders relax, the weight of trust settling between them. Later, alone in the kitchen, Caleb leaned heavily on the counter, head bowed. The house had never felt so full, and yet he carried the fear of loss like a second skin. Every instinct told him to keep distance, to avoid the kind of pain that had haunted him since his sister's death. But tonight, he made a different choice. He chose to stay close. He chose to try. The quiet was shattered by Sheriff Pike's call. An anonymous tip claimed the children were abandoned deliberately, the number traced back to a burner phone purchased by Roy Cutter. Maya's broken words returned to him. The man said she would come back if they waited. The truth was darker than he had feared. Roy was not just a shadow in the storm, he was a predator playing with fear like fire. Caleb's grip tightened on the phone, his voice low but steady. "I will keep them safe, whatever it takes." Morning came pale and brittle, the world outside buried in white. For the first time in years, Caleb woke to the sound of small footsteps above and a baby's cry that was not his own. In the kitchen, Maya stood on tiptoe to pour water, her hair tangled from sleep. When Caleb asked if she had rested, she shook her head. "I was afraid if I closed my eyes, he would come back." She did not need to say who. Caleb knelt to meet her gaze. "You are safe here. No one is getting in." Later, Benji Cole returned with checklists: food, heat, security. Maya answered with clipped words, Leo sucking his thumb nearby. Caleb sensed Benji's doubt, but the man left with fewer questions than he came with. As the door closed, Caleb turned to his own strengths: information. He called his dispatchers at Highline Freight, requesting dash cam footage from rigs that had crossed the canyon. Within hours, video streamed in, snow and headlights filling the screens. Then at dusk the night before, one clip revealed a blue tow truck idling by the shoulder. A figure removed a car seat, left it on the road, and drove away. The drop was swift, practiced, chillingly routine. Caleb's fist clenched. The past and present collided in that single frame: his sister's ghost, the smell of oil, Roy Cutter's name. He sent the footage to Sheriff Pike, her voice sharpening with urgency. "We will cross-check his logs, that is good work." Yet even as law enforcement moved, the house shifted in quieter ways. Maya drew in her sketchbook at the kitchen table, Leo giggled at a toy, and Caleb felt the ache of old loneliness easing into something unfamiliar. A family, though not his, seemed to fill the spaces that had been empty too long. Still, beneath it all, anxiety thrummed like an undercurrent. This fight was personal. It was not just about two abandoned children. It was about refusing to lose again. That evening, Maya hovered in the doorway, clutching her sketchbook. She spoke hesitantly. "He said if Mom didn't come back, we would learn. I do not want to learn." The words shattered Caleb's composure. Years ago, he had heard the same cruelty in different form. His sister's last words had been a promise she could not keep. "I will be fine, Kel. I will just wait." Tonight, he gave Maya the promise he wished he could have given then. "You will not learn anything from men like him, not while you are here." And when Sheriff Pike called again, confirming Roy's burner phone purchase and opening new leads, Caleb felt the weight of resolve settle deep in his chest. The storm outside raged, but in his house, a fragile bond was forming, stronger than the wind. He looked at the children as they drifted toward sleep, and silently he vowed, "This time it ends differently." Night fell over Gallatin Canyon with a silence so thick it pressed against the windows of Caleb's ranch. Inside, light glowed from every corner as if he could keep the storm and the darkness at bay by sheer force of will. He could not rest. The children slept upstairs, their breathing soft, their small lives entrusted to the safety of his walls. Elena, their mother, had been found, bruised but alive, and now the weight of her survival mingled with the fragile trust of her children. For Caleb, it was more than protection, it was redemption. The days that followed blurred into a mix of tension and hope. Sheriff Pike brought updates, storage unit records, burner phone trails, evidence that tightened the noose around Roy Cutter. Elena, reunited with Maya and Leo, tried to piece herself back together. Shame clung to her words, guilt heavy in her eyes, but Caleb countered her despair with a quiet certainty. "You survived. You fought back. That is enough." He wished someone had told his sister those words long ago. Now, saying them felt like stitching a wound that had been open for decades. Court loomed like a storm cloud. In the bare courtroom, Roy tried to twist the story, painting Alina as unstable, unfit, abandoning her children. His lawyer held up shaky cell phone videos and words crafted to deceive. But Maya's testimony pierced through, her voice trembling yet clear. He said if Mom didn't come back, we would learn. The room seemed to stop at that single word. Sheriff Pike laid out receipts, dash cam evidence, and neighbor testimony, stripping Roy's lies bare. Caleb added his own voice, steady and grounded, telling the judge that no child belonged on the roadside in a Montana winter. His words carried more than logic. They carried the ache of memory and the force of conviction. Judge Whitford ruled in Alina's favor, granting her temporary custody, protective orders, and support. Relief spilled across her face, across Maya's, even across little Leo's laughter, as if he could feel hope ripple through the air. Yet victory did not mean safety. When Caleb returned home that evening, he found a bottle of motor oil on his porch, left like a signature. Roy's threat hung in the cold air, silent but vicious. Caleb bagged it, sent a photo to Pike, and walked the fence line with a vigilance that never left him. Nights grew heavier. He checked locks twice, watched headlights crawl past on the road, listened for engines that did not belong. Alina learned the keypad on the doors. Maya practiced drills with Leo, her small hands steady, though her childhood should have been free of such things. It broke Caleb's heart to watch, but it hardened his resolve. One night, alarms shrieked through the stillness. Caleb bolted from bed, the cold biting at his bare skin as he rushed outside. The snow reflected security lights, casting long shadows. At the edge of the property, a blue truck fishtailed before vanishing into the night. Bootprints scarred the snow near the mudroom. He knew it was Roy. Rage and fear mixed in his blood, but when he returned inside, he forced calm into his voice for Maya's sake. Kneeling before her, he said, "This house is your shield now, and I will stand in front of it as long as it takes." Something in her eyes shifted then. She believed him. The sheriff increased patrols. Neighbors shared doorbell footage of Roy's truck lingering at the lane. Alina trembled when she saw it, whispering, "He will not stop, will he?" Caleb squeezed her shoulder. "He will, because we are not alone and we will not be scared off." He called an attorney, pressed charges, demanded restraining orders. But more than that, he gathered Alina and the children one night before the fire, his voice low but fierce. "We are not only going to survive this. We are going to build something stronger." It was a promise he kept in small ways. He read stories to Maya when nightmares woke her. He fixed cribs and built birdhouses, showing her how wood could be shaped into safety. He carried Leo when the boy stumbled, patient with every step. Alina, too, began to soften. Her laughter returned slowly, her shoulders loosened, and she began to believe in mornings free of fear. The house, once sterile and silent, now carried warmth. Drawings filled the fridge. Toys cluttered the floors. Music played faintly in the kitchen. Caleb no longer felt like a ghost wandering his own halls. When Roy was finally arrested, the court imposed a no-contact order. Relief swept through the town, through the family, but Caleb knew healing would take longer. He searched for a home for Alina and her children, something close to Maya's school, safe and bright. When she questioned why, he answered simply, "Because someone should have done it for my sister. Because I can. Because you are not alone anymore." Her tears said more than words. Weeks later, Alina and the children moved into a small bungalow filled with light. Caleb stayed nearby, fixing what broke, showing up when needed, fading into the background when not. He was no savior, no replacement father, just a man who refused to let them face the world without a hand to hold. The community rallied too. Donations arrived, neighbors stopped by, the diner where Alina worked became a place of gathering and support. Sheriff Pike brought pie, Avery Quinn wrote stories that spread compassion, and Benji checked in not only as a duty but as a friend. Maya's drawings changed from cold roads and shadows to bright trucks and smiling faces. Leo toddled across rugs, babbling with joy. Alina learned to laugh without glancing over her shoulder. One crisp day in spring, Caleb took them to a roadside where a new green sign read Emergency Aid Box, 1 mile. It was stocked with blankets, formula, and notes written in Maya's careful hand. "If you need help, you are not alone." Standing there watching snow drift gently, Alina whispered, "We made it." Caleb nodded, warmth rising in his chest. "You did, and you are never going back." Maya tugged his sleeve. "Can we help more people? Maybe put a box at every rest stop?" He smiled. "If you make the cards, I will do the driving." Christmas came again 1 year later. The same snow fell, the same canyon stretched out, but everything had changed. The ranch rang with laughter, the tree stood tall with gifts beneath, and warmth filled every room. Maya wore a new pink coat, Leo toddled with blankets in hand, and Alina hummed as she cooked. Caleb stood at the doorway, watching them, realizing that he had not only rescued a family on a frozen night but had found his own salvation in return. Families, he thought, are not only the ones you are born to. They are the ones who show up when the world turns cold, the ones who choose to stay. He had chosen, and he would not turn away again. There are nights that feel endless, when the cold outside seeps into the heart, and silence becomes heavier than any snowstorm. For Caleb, Christmas Eve had once been such a night, filled with grief, with the memory of a sister he could not save. But on that frozen road, everything changed. One man's decision to stop, to kneel beside a frightened girl and her baby brother, rewrote a story that might have ended in tragedy. What began as an act of rescue became the foundation of something far deeper: trust, family, and the unshakable belief that even in the darkest places, love can still find its way. Maya's small voice, Leo's fragile breath, Alina's trembling courage, together they wove a new beginning, not only for themselves but for Caleb as well. The millionaire who thought he had lost the ability to feel discovered that compassion is not a weakness but a strength more powerful than wealth or status. And the little girl who once whispered, "Do not take my brother," grew into a child who believed in helping others, leaving notes for strangers that read, "If you need help, you are not alone." Their story reminds us that healing is possible, that broken hearts can mend when people choose to show up for one another. It is easy to pass by suffering, to keep driving when the storm rages, to believe that someone else will stop. But the truth is, sometimes we are the only ones who can. Sometimes the choice we make in a single moment can change not just one life, but many. Caleb's story is not about perfection or heroism in the traditional sense. It is about presence, about showing up when it matters most, about refusing to let fear or loss dictate who we are. It is about building family not through blood alone, but through choice, kindness, and courage. If this story touched you, let it remind you of the strength you already carry. Each of us has the power to turn despair into hope, to bring warmth where there is cold, to be the person who says, "You are not alone." And if you believe in that power, if you believe in second chances, in resilience, and in the quiet heroes who walk among us, then stay with us. Because there are more stories waiting to be told, stories of healing, of courage, of ordinary people who choose to love when it is hardest. Subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories today, And let these echoes of compassion remind you that even in the darkest winter, the light of humanity still burns bright.